Let's get rowdy.
Hey guys, I'm going to welcome you back to the Rob Griffin Show. I am your humble host, the one and only Mr. Rob Griffin. Thank you so much for being here, guys. I am so excited about this new project. So if you don't know me, if you're new here, and maybe this is the first time that we've been able to talk to one another, I've been podcasting for several years now. I've been very blessed to build quite a following. And so thank you for those who are out there. I've been the co-host of a show called The Rob and Dale Show for several years now. Go check us out on Spotify, iTunes, anywhere you can find a podcast. Rob and Dale Show is pretty cool, pretty clean, pretty awesome. We interview entrepreneurs there, and that show's doing really well. But I wanted to branch off and do something a little more cutting edge, a little more gritty, and to be brutally honest with you, just a little more in your face reality. Because the world we live in right now, it's going to hell in a handbasket. And so the model of this show is somebody has to say it, because if we continue down this road and we're always so goddamn politically correct that we're never ever going to get to a point where we have some just sanity back in the United States of America. So before I get into the content of today's show, I have a ton of stuff planned for you, some amazing episodes in the future. I think you're going to really like that. But I thought I'd give you a little introduction. So if you've never met me, we've never conversed before, maybe you found me on Spotify or iTunes or what have you, I thought I'd just tell you a little bit of background about myself. So I am a happily married man. Gosh, man, 22 years of marriage, which means I've learned to say yes, dear, yes, dear, a lot, and I've been able to like tell her you're right all the time, even if I disagree with that point. Anyway, I'm going to tell you, I grew up in the deep South in a little town called Gray, Georgia. Now, most of you have no freaking clue where Gray, Georgia is. You may not even know where Central Georgia is. There's a little town called Macon, about 45 minutes south of there is a little town called Gray in Jones County. That's where I grew up, in the sticks, bro. Like, not quite like Theo with all his crazy stories, but pretty damn close. And we had camaraderie, and everybody knew everybody, and life was good and simple, and no internet, and we played outside, and we didn't get stuck inside in front of a screen. Isn't it crazy how life has changed? Anyway, so I grew up in the deep South. I'm very blessed to have both mom and dad at home. You know, I know many people they have the inability to have both parents at home, and that's sadly what I think. That's part of what's happening to America. Is we've destroyed the family unit, and we've tried to make it not as important as it should be. But I can tell you, as the parent in a current solid family unit and also being raised in that, I think it's really important. So anyway, I grew up in South Georgia, and I've always been a go-getter, or someone who is not willing to take a chance. And that's what I would ask you to do, is take a chance. If you're given that opportunity, go for it, man. So my dad had always had this dream of living in Hawaii. And I remember when he was telling me as a little kid, he's like, bro, he didn't say bro, by the way. They didn't say that back then. Anyway, he goes, son, or something like that. Anyway, he goes, one of these days we're going to live in Hawaii. And I remember thinking to myself, my dad is crazy. We live in a small little shithole town with one red light in the middle of South Central Georgia. And there's no way any one of us in that town would ever think that we'd be living in paradise in Honolulu, Hawaii, or something like that, right? That was so far from the reality that we knew that it would never become a reality. But anyway, long story short, my dad was stationed there for a brief time when he was in the Navy. My dad was what they call UDT, or the Underwater Demolition Team, or Frogman. They called them back before the SEALs were called SEALs. So yeah, he was pretty much a badass, and he did 4 tours in Vietnam before I was born. So we're talking early to mid 60s. He got into a bunch of crazy stuff over there. And during his time of being stationed in Hawaii, he always wanted to go back there. But he got a job at Georgia Power, and he grew up in South Georgia, and that's all he knew. But he knew the power industry, and he had a good friend of his who got him a job opportunity in Hawaii. And I remember he called me one day, and he goes, "Hey, We're going. Do you want to stay here or you want to come with us? And I was 19 years old. I live in Georgia. I was going to college at the time at Macon College in Macon, Georgia. Met some great friends there. You know who you are. And I remember thinking, will I ever have this kind of opportunity again? And the short answer was no. So I said, shoot, man, I'm going. It was not a tough decision. So I decided, hey, let's go to paradise. Let's go live that dream. So I moved with my dad when I was a very young man to Hawaii. And we didn't necessarily move to the best part because we had to be close to his work. So they moved us to the far west side of Oahu. For those of you who are familiar with Oahu, there's a little town called Nanakuli, which is on the far west side, very countryside, very Polynesian side. And if you look like this over there, you're going to have a tough time. And I was not excluded from that. We had some unique run-ins after I moved there. Back in the day in Hawaii, they had this thing called Kill Haole Day. Now, if you don't know what haole stands for, haole is a word that they use there from the Hawaiian language. It basically means visitor or foreigner. So basically, if you're not Polynesian or if you didn't born and raised there, you're a haole. And back in those days, if you went to school on Kill Haole Day, you got your ass beat down on sight. Like that was a real thing back then. And I was not that aware of it. A friend of mine told me, hey, you probably shouldn't go to class tomorrow. And I learned very quickly that there was a unique divide there. Anyway, so I lived in Hawaii for a long time. I was very blessed to meet my current wife while I was living in Hawaii. And when I was living there, I escaped for a short term. I moved to Vegas for a little while, back with my former employer. I used to work for a video company called Blockbuster Video. You might remember Blockbuster Video? And I worked in Hawaii there. I got the opportunity to move to Vegas as a store manager, which I did. And I did that for a little bit. I ended up coming back to Hawaii because I was not that fond of Vegas. But once I got married, I thought, man, it was way cheaper in Vegas. So I discussed it with my bride. I said, hey, babe, why don't we just move there and go back to Vegas because cost of living was really good. Job opportunity was way better than it was in Honolulu at the time. And I'm not bashing Honolulu. I love it, miss it. But, job opportunity, you're either in tourism or government or retail, and that's pretty much about it. So I moved to the mainland, we call it, to try to give myself more opportunity. After getting there, very shortly after that, I had a really unique situation. I had one of my employees at my video store was stealing multiple deposits. Now we're talking thousands of dollars. And I basically did my own little internal investigation. I decided to check the videotapes. We had a little key lock on the store, so I would tell you who punched in their code to enter the store and when to exit the store. So there was a pretty good evidence trail there. And then I interviewed all the staff. So I got all these statements from everybody. And I was asking them, hey, what do you know about this? What do you know about that? And then I called the detective once I figure out who the shithead was that was stealing from me. And I said, hey, I need you to come down here. I got a case for you. So the detective showed up. Officer O'Brien. I'm not sure if you're a sergeant, lieutenant, or captain by now, sir, but thanks again for your amazing insight and your amazing suggestion. So anyway, I meet Mr. O'Brien, and he goes, Rob, have you ever considered being a police officer or a detective? And I said, no, man, zero interest in that at the time in my life. He goes, well, look, you've pretty much done my entire case. You got me statements, you got me video, you got me evidence. Like all I have to do is type this up, take shithead to jail, and we're done here. He said, you should really check. He goes, Metro's not hiring right now, but Henderson is. I go, Henderson, like Henderson, Nevada? He goes, yeah. He goes, go on their website. So I leave work, right? I go home. I get on my computer. Henderson Police Department is hiring, but the job position closes tomorrow. I go down there. I'm applicant number 850. I turned in my paperwork to a young lady named Mary Jo. Shout out, Mary Jo. Love you. Miss you. And I hand her my application in my Blockbuster Video uniform. And from that day forward, I was branded as, you guessed it, Blockbuster. But anyway, I go through the hiring process. If you've never done this, if those of you are like hating on the cops, it is not easy to become a freaking police officer. Like they background check you and polygraphs, and they mail letters to your neighbors and your family and your family. And they mailed letters to my in-laws in Tokyo to check my background. So they go through this very extensive process. Long story short, I get hired, and you cut your teeth in patrol. So you're basically a patrol guy. You're driving a marked unit around, 911 calls, and you're handling and you're running to all kinds of insanity. And I'm telling you, man, you will see dregs of society. You will see evil. You will see atrocities that no one thought were possible. I remember when I first got hired, they were like, Rob, you're going to see some pretty gnarly stuff. You're going to see some crazy shit that's going to probably mess with your head. In fact, they try to caution you when you're in the police academy. Like they had the coroner came in. I'll never forget this. Coroner comes in to teach a class, and the entire class was crime scenes and blood and guts and gore and gnarly shit. And it's usually done in the first couple of weeks of the academy, so you can get those who are not ready for that job out. If you can't handle it in a classroom setting, you're certainly not going to be able to handle it out there on the street. Anyway, so I get through that process. I become a police officer after 3 years of hard work and dedication and running and gunning. People notice, and I was told, hey, Rob, you should probably test to be a detective. And I wasn't planning on becoming a detective, just like I wasn't planning on becoming a police officer. But a friend said, hey, you should probably try. I've seen your work. You did a good job. You might make a good detective. So I tested. Long story short, I came out number one on the list. I beat out a ton of guys with way more seniority than me. And I'm not saying that to brag or boast. I'm just saying hard work, dedication will get you a lot of ways in most places. So just don't be afraid to work your ass off, because it could really come back and reward you at a later date. So anyway, I made detective on an early portion of my career, and I got thrown into financial crimes, which is boring, brutal. I got some stories that are decent, but maybe we'll share those on a future episode. But for the most part, it was kind of lame. But I did it, and I did it well. Hooking and booking, man, charging guys, booking guys. I put a couple people away for a very long time on some great cases. And then life kind of happens. And then my sergeant calls me in his office and says, hey, Griffin, how do you feel about working undercover? And I had never considered working undercover, but he goes, man, you've done very well and you might be good at it. I said, well, let me talk to my wife. He goes, too late. I've already put you in. And so I went from being a financial crimes detective to a member or the head or the main agent of what we call our Henderson Rope Unit, which is, again, I'll share you those details at a later date. But I do all this, and I'm doing these things, and I was enjoying my career, but there's a lot of politics and BS that goes on behind the scenes that I was not aware of, and you get immersed into that at a later date. But for those of you who are out there who maybe are unhappy with the cops right now, maybe you're unhappy with what you're seeing on the news, or this George Floyd thing has got you all spun into a ruckus, right? Or maybe these constant where the media tries to paint this vision that cops are just out there killing people of color. That is not the case, man. For those of you that are screaming for us to defund the police or to try to remove their opportunities to go out and enforce the law the way that I think that it should be done, I think that you don't realize what you're asking for. In fact, I would even caution you as to say, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. If they do end up passing some law or some type of thing that would allow us to defund the police, this country is over. Like, society as we know it will cease to exist. Because if you don't have accountability for bad behavior, it's going to be chaos, man. It's going to be ridiculous. And so I would caution you, be careful what you wish for. Because if you get it, it means the end of America as we know it. So if you are on the fence and maybe you're like, I'm not sure, maybe the cops are doing bad stuff, maybe they aren't. Here's my suggestion to you. I would ask that you would contact your local PD and reach out to them and say, hey, I would love to come do a ride along. What's a ride along? They're going to have you fill out a little form. You're going to fill in this form. You're going to go down to the local PD. They'll pair you up with an officer, and you actually ride in their police car with them. And you go to every call for service that they handle, and you are going to be basically a spectator on scene. The only time that they would take you out of that scene is if you were, thrown into a very stressful situation, a shooting type of situation. Now they have mandates. They have to drop you off and not bring you into that chaos, right? So, but what you will see is you will get to see some absolute insanity. Unless, of course, you get what we call the ride-along curse, which is if you go on a ride-along, sometimes nothing happens. But I can tell you a few times in my career, I had people with me on ride-alongs, and they got the full Monty, man. They got immersed. This is the most craziest shit you could even imagine. Now, for those of you who have never experienced that, I would just ask you to go experience it. Because it's really eye-opening when you see what the cops are dealing with on a day-to-day basis and realize the life and death situations they have to make decisions where you don't have to deal with that at work. Like, how many times have you gone to work, sat at your cubicle or your desk, or went up to wherever you do your job and thought, I may not get to go home today. Like, I might get killed at work. Like, I could literally die here. See, most people in America don't have those type of fears or that type of stress, but police officers in the United States every day, that is a daily occurrence, folks. I've heard wives of cops say their most pleasant sound that they've ever hear is when they hear the sound of Velcro ripping open when their significant other came home from a tour of duty on the job, on the police job, because Velcro meant that they made it home alive. Velcro meant that they were able to get past their shift and get home and not die. And so for the vast majority of you out there, that's not even a concern you have because it's your job. That's not the reality. Now, I realize active shooter situations are happening. It happened just here recently in Allen, Texas. People were out shopping and didn't expect they were going to get killed that day. I totally get it. That's why I suggest strongly that if you have the ability to carry and be trained properly with a firearm, that you should carry one. Second Amendment all day, every day. Carry it with you because you never know when some psycho might show up to try to harm you and your kids and your family. So be prepared. Anyway, for a police officer, this is an everyday occurrence. They get to work, they think, today might be the day. And I have several stories to share with you, but today I'll give you one simple one. Just to give you a little taste of what it could be like. Now, I was a decorated detective. I was very good at what I did, but some political changes happened within the police department. A new captain take over. What was his name? I'm not going to bust him out on this show. But anyway, he asked me to come into his office because they were trying to decide who was going to stay, who was not going to go stay. But I found out very quickly the politics and the bullshit that happens behind the scenes. His decision was already made up. I was already getting transferred out, which meant a 12% pay cut for me. And his buddy got moved in. So that's the kind of some of the crazy shit that happens with the police department that makes people not want to stay there. Plus the money morning quarterbacking and the constant media folks jumping in there and telling you didn't do your job right with zero training, never been in a fight, never been shot at in their life. They don't understand, man. So anyway, I find out I'm being transferred out, lost my 12% pay, and I get kicked back to the very beginning of where I started my career, which is a patrol officer. And I'm not saying being a patrol is bad. God bless you, man. You guys are the soldiers out there. But I got put back in patrol. I'm pushing my marked unit around, driving through Henderson. Now, guys, it's 7:30 a.m. I can't remember the day of the week, but just imagine a typical Wednesday. We'll call it Wednesday. And I get sent a call. And if you're in a patrol, for those who've done this before, you have what's called a computer or MDT in your car. And when you get a dispatch, a little bell rings. Diddling, diddling, a little bell will go off. Unless, of course, it's a hot call. Then they'll give you what's called the hot tone. And the hot tone means you get to run code 3, which means you're driving with lights and sirens. That part's fun. But anyway, I get a call, which probably should have been a hot call, but it wasn't. Okay. It was a diddling, diddling on my MDT. And I'm like, what is this? I start reading the contents of the call, and it says, wife had called 911. Her husband, who just got out of prison, was there and had beat the living shit out of this lady. And she was telling dispatcher that she was beaten and bloody. But she also said, my husband said, if you call the cops, I'm going to force them to kill me today. The whole, stereotypical suicide by cop, right? And I'm thinking, okay, it's 7:30 a.m. I've been a detective for years. I haven't had to deal with this kind of crazy shit for a very long time. And I'm thinking, I have to go there. And I look on the map. I am close. I'm like literally a few turns away from this call. And all I have now is there's a white guy who's going to run at me with a knife and force me to kill him. That's all I know. And I know he just got out of prison. They did mention something about his gang activity or something like that. So all I know is I have a white guy who's going to try to kill me when I arrive. Now, I'm driving on a street called Warm Springs in Henderson, which I know you don't care or don't know where that is. But anyway, I'm driving. I have to make a right a left and then go down a little bit and then another left in order to enter the neighborhood where my suspect's at his house having a meltdown. Okay. So I know white guy, run at me, gonna kill me, right? So I make my right, I make my first left, and as soon as I do, there's a Tahoe in the middle of the road that was stopped. And I remember seeing this truck going, okay. And I didn't think too much of it at first, but as soon as they saw my patrol car, they jump out of their car and start running towards my patrol vehicle. It's a white guy. I throw my Tahoe into park as we're rolling. Like we're doing like 30 miles an hour. I say we. I was doing 30 miles an hour in my Tahoe and I threw it into park. Can you imagine what that does to your transmission? But anyway, my truck was going clack, 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 clack. And it was trying to stop. And this dude's running at me and I jump out of my car. I got my gun and I'm screaming at him. Show me your fucking hands. And I'm screaming at the guy as loud as I possibly can. And he doesn't even see the fact that I'm pointing my gun at him. He keeps running at me. And I'm squeezing the trigger, ready to end this dude's life. And then he goes, wait, 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 wait. He throws his hands in the air. And he goes, sir, please don't kill my son. Now, I remember thinking to myself, my heart's beating out of my chest. I'm like, what in the hell is going on here? And I realized this was not my suspect. It was his dad, who showed up just before I did to try to save his son's life because he knew the cops were coming. And they were probably going to kill him. Now, this entire commotion, except for taking years off my life that day, all it really did is it caused a whole lot of noise and attracted shithead that was down the street. When I say shithead, I'm talking about Skinhead, AB, Aryan Brotherhood, guy with tattoos on his face, swastikas on his neck, that dude. He hears the entire commotion between me and his father, where his father almost died at my hand. And guess what he does? He turns his attention towards me. Now, here I am. I'm there by myself. I got there way too early. We would typically never go to these calls alone, but here we are. I'm on the corner. He's there. And I thought, well, shit, I got to go deal with this. Now, this guy is outside of his house in his driveway, but he's seeing me. And I'm guessing right now where he's probably 300 yards away. So I put my patrol vehicle in drive. I move over a little bit closer and I get it out, put it in park. Open my door and I get behind my door and I'm trying to talk to the guy. Now he's walking towards me and he's got a knife in his hand. I'm talking like a real knife, not like a pocket knife, like one of those Crocodile Dundee knives. Like that's not a knife. He had one of those like big ass Bowie knives about yay big. And he's walking towards me screaming his head off. Like I remember, man, I could see, the veins in your neck when you scream. Like he was screaming, kill me, kill me. And he was just screaming like bloody murder at me, like kill me. And I remember thinking, oh my God, like what do we do here? And I get on the radio. I say, I need a code red, which means I need them to lock down the radio. Nobody can talk but me. And that also means, holy shit, send everybody. I need help. I'm by myself, man. You should never show up to these calls by yourself. And the guy's walking. He's coming down the street. He's got this big ass Bowie knife in his hand. And I literally like go back to my training. And I remember what they taught us in the academy. If someone's got an edged weapon and they're 21 feet from you, if they get within 21 feet, you have to shoot them. You got to kill this person. And I'm thinking, am I going to have to murder? Not murder, but am I going to kill this guy today, here, right now? And he's walking towards me and he's screaming. I see the veins popping out of his neck, but I also see swastika tattoos and face ink and all this stuff that would tell you this is a bad dude you need to take out, right? He's coming towards me and I'm just literally mapping his steps. And I put a line on the ground, a little invisible line that says, if he gets to 21 feet, I'm going to dump this dude. And I'm just screaming and I'm begging him, please, sir, don't let me do this. Please don't let me do this. Please. I don't want this on my conscience. I don't want to have to kill another human being. Please don't do this to me. And I'm begging him and I'm trying to talk. Hey man, what's your name? What's your name? And I wish I could remember, but I think my mind kind of blocked it out. I can't recall what he said or what he did. Only thing I can really remember was he was about 28, 27, 26 feet. And I'm begging and pleading with him to stop. And then a miracle happened. His little daughter ran out of the house. She's like, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. And I'm like, please, bro, don't make me kill you in front of your child. Please don't put that on my conscience. Daddy, 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 please, no, no, no. And for whatever reason, it clicked with him. And he dropped the knife. He said, man, I'm sorry. He said, I just don't want to go to prison. I said, bro, let's just get you safe. Let's just keep you out of the grave right at this point, right? Forget prison. Shit. Let's get you safe and let's get you back into your daughter's arms and not die today. And I was able somehow, some way to talk him down. He went into handcuffs. I cuffed him myself personally. I put him in the back of my patrol car, buckled his seatbelt, locked the door, and went over and like fell down on the sidewalk, like laid down on the ground, having a total adrenaline dump as my heart was beating like that, like crazy beating. And of course now the cavalry's showing up and everybody's there and cars are screeching and everything. And I'm like, I had this moment of clarity. I'm like, how many of you deal with that kind of crazy shit at work where you have to think life or death, kill or be killed in that split second? And most of you will probably never, and I hope to God you never even have to experience that, but you're hating on the cops, man, and defund the police and hope and pray that something bad never happens to you. When you dial 911, don't you want someone who's going to show up, who's willing to die to protect you? Hope so. So anyway, that was one of many crazy stories we have for you. Next week, we're going to have an awesome guest. We're going to have my good friend Kevin, who was actually in the middle of the BLM riots in Kenosha, Wisconsin, when Kyle Rittenhouse went down there, exercised his Second Amendment right to protect a car dealership and ended up having to kill people who were trying to kill him. It's going to be a very exciting episode. We have many, many more coming. Thank you so much for joining me on this maiden voyage of the Rob Griffin Show, the first and only, probably the worst ever episode this show's ever going to have. I promise we'll get better in the future, but thank you so much for being here. Please like and subscribe to the show. Please find us on Spotify and iTunes or anywhere you would find a podcast, and we'll catch you on the next one. God bless and see you next time.
Never imagined a love like yours. Through all the endless nights, you were the one I was searching for, looking for the one that was worth it, yeah. And all this time, you were right here by my side. You were right here. Through all the pain and the heartaches, now it's all messed up and I'm walking out, slamming the door. And now I'm riding off into the dark on a wild horse, yeah, with nothing but my thoughts, don't know